Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you, big deal for me. I never thought I'd be the type of person to air my family's dirty laundry on the internet. But here I am, sitting in my apartment at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except what happened tonight. My hands are still shaking as I type this. I need to get this out because if I don't, I think I might actually lose my mind. My name is Julianne, and 3 years ago, my daughter Lily died. She was 6 years old, and she had a rare, complex congenital heart defect, the aggressive kind, the kind that requires multiple specialized surgeries, experimental drugs, and round-the-clock care that insurance companies love to deny coverage for. My husband, Ethan, and I did everything we could. We maxed out credit cards, took out loans, sold our car, and even started a crowdfunding campaign that barely made a dent in the astronomical bills. We were drowning, watching our little girl suffer and begging anyone who would listen for help. I remember the day I called my parents, absolutely desperate. Lily had been in the hospital for 2 months, and we just found out that the next phase of her surgery wasn't fully covered by insurance. We needed $60,000, and we needed it fast. I was crying so hard, I could barely speak. My mom answered the phone, and I explained everything through sobs. I told her about the surgery, about how Lily was so brave but so weak, about how the doctor said this could save her life. There was this long pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother said in that cool, measured voice of hers, "Julianne, you know, we're on a fixed income. Your father's. Retirement isn't what we hoped it would be. We simply don't have that kind of money to spare." And last date, I begged. I actually got on my knees in that hospital corridor and begged into the phone. I told her we'd pay them back, every cent with interest. I told her I'd sign over anything they wanted. I would have sold my soul to the devil himself if it meant saving Lily. But my dad got on the phone and said the same thing. They were sorry. They wished they could help, but they just couldn't afford it. They suggested we look into medical bankruptcy, maybe talk to a social worker at the hospital. When I hung up that phone, something inside me broke, but I didn't have time to process it because Lily needed me. Ethan and I ended up getting the money through a combination of his parents taking out a second mortgage, my boss giving me an advance on a year's salary, and a loan from a medical financing company with an interest rate that should be illegal. Lily got her surgery, but it wasn't enough. 6 months later, my baby girl died in my arms, weighing less than 40 pounds, her skin pale, her beautiful green eyes still trying to smile at me, even as the life drained out of them. The last thing she said was, "I love you. Mommy, don't be sad." How do you move on from that? How do you wake up every morning knowing your child is gone? My sister Sarah, on the other hand, has 3 kids, Jack, Mia, and Ben, all healthy, all thriving, all attending the Elite Equestrian Academy, one of the most prestigious, high-end riding clubs in our state. Membership there runs about $40,000 per year per child, plus horse upkeep. Do the math. That's $120,000 annually. I knew Sarah, and her husband Mark did well. Mark's an investment banker, and Sarah manages a luxury boutique. They live in a beautiful house in the suburbs with a tennis court, take vacations to the Coffic, Caribbean, and drive matching Porsche Cayennes. I didn't begrudge them their success. I really didn't. Even after Lily died, when I could barely afford to keep the lights on because of our debt, I never resented Sarah's good fortune. We'd never been super close growing up, but she was still my sister. She sent a flower arrangement to Lily's funeral, one of those generic ones from a website. She didn't stay long at the service, said the kids had a riding competition. For 3 years, I've been rebuilding my life. Ethan and I separated 18 months after Lily died. Grief destroyed our marriage. We just couldn't look at each other without seeing her absence. The divorce was amicable, if devastatingly sad. We still talk, still support each other in our healing, but we couldn't stay married. The weight of loss was too heavy for us to carry together. I've been working 2 jobs to pay off the medical debt and the money we borrowed. Barely see my tiny apartment in daylight. I'm a husk of who I used to be, going through the motions, existing, but not living. Therapy helps, but there's a hole in my chest that will never heal. Everyone says, time makes it easier, but they're liars. Time just makes you better at pretending to be okay. 2 weeks ago, something happened that changed everything. I was having coffee with my old college roommate Jessica, who happens to work in administration at the Elite Equestrian Academy. We hadn't seen each other in months, and she was catching me up on her life when she mentioned something in passing. It's so wonderful that your parents are able to help Sarah with the membership, she said, stirring her latte. I processed the payment from their account just last week. It's such a blessing when grandparents can contribute to their grandchildren's passions. I must have looked like I'd been struck by lightning, because Jessica immediately looked concerned. Julianne, are you okay? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The coffee shop started spinning around me. Jessica grabbed my hand across the table, asking me what was wrong, if I needed water, if I was going to be sick. Finally, I managed to choke out, "What do you mean, my parents' account?" That's when Jessica realized she'd revealed something I wasn't supposed to know. Her face went pale and she started backtracking, saying maybe she'd made a glad mistake. Maybe she was confused with another family. But I pressed her. I needed to know. After some hesitation and my promise that I wouldn't reveal how I'd found out, she told me the truth. My parents had been paying the full membership fees for all 3 of Sarah's kids at the Bract Academy for the past 4 years. Every quarter, like clockwork, a check would arrive from their joint account. $120,000 every single year for 4 years. That's $480,000. Let that sink in. $480,000 for high-end equestrian sports, while my daughter died because they claimed they couldn't spare $60,000 for her life-saving surgery. I don't remember leaving the coffee shop. I don't remember driving home. I just remember sitting in my car outside my apartment building, screaming until my throat was raw. I punched the steering wheel until my knuckles were bruised. Then I just sat there in silence, staring at nothing, as the sun set and darkness filled the bruised car. That night, I didn't sleep. I went through every interaction with my parents over the past 7 years, reframing everything with this new horrific knowledge. Every holiday where they gave Sarah's kids lavish gifts while I got a gift card. Every family gathering where they praised Sarah's parenting and made subtle digs about my choices. Every time I called them in desperation and they'd claimed poverty, they'd lied. While I was watching my daughter die, while I was selling everything I owned, while I was destroying my life and my marriage trying to save Lily, they were writing checks for my sister's kids to ride horses in an elite stable with indoor arenas and a full-time groom staff. For 2 weeks, I debated what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to call them and scream until they understood the magnitude of their betrayal. But another part of me, the part that was still their daughter despite everything, wanted to believe there was some explanation, some reason, that would make this make sense, even though I knew deep down there wasn't one. During those 2 weeks, I became obsessed with piecing together the timeline. I pulled out old bank statements, medical bills, anything that could help me understand when exactly my parents had started funding Sarah's perfect life. While watching mine crumble, I created a spreadsheet, because apparently grief and rage had turned me into someone who documents betrayal in Excel. The first membership payment from my parents to the academy was made in July, 7 years ago. I know this because I did more digging, called in favors, and maybe crossed some ethical lines I'm not proud of. July 7 years ago, Lily was diagnosed in May of that year. By July, we were already drowning in medical bills, already starting to panic about how we'd afford her treatment. That means my parents made the conscious decision to commit over $120,000 a year to equestrian fees within 2 months of Lily's diagnosis. They knew she was sick. They know we were struggling, and they chose to write those checks. Anyway, I started having panic attacks during those 2 weeks. I'd be at work stocking shelves at the warehouse store where I work my second job, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I'd have to lock myself in the bathroom, sitting on the floor trying to remember the breathing exercises my therapist taught me. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, out through the mouth for 8. But no breathing exercise could calm the rage that was building inside me like a pressure cooker about to explode. I also started remembering things I'd blocked out, things my brain had protected me from during the worst of my grief, like the time my father had lectured me about financial responsibility, suggesting that maybe Ethan and I had been living beyond our means, implying that our money troubles were somehow our own fault. This was while Lily was in treatment, while we were selling everything we owned, and he knew it. He looked me in the eye and essentially blamed us for our financial ruin, all while writing massive checks for Sarah's kids. I remembered Lily's last birthday party, the one right before she got too sick for celebrations. We'd had it at our apartment because we couldn't afford anything else. It was just family, a homemade cake, and a few presents we'd scraped together money for. Sarah had shown up late, complained about the parking, and left early because Jack had a riding lesson. Riding lesson at a high-end club my parents also paid a membership for. I later discovered my parents had given Lily a $100 gift card for her birthday, $100, and I'd been grateful for it because $100 was $100. Meanwhile, I were Benevolity. Later learned they'd given each of Sarah's kids professional-grade gaming laptops that same month, top-of-the-line models that cost $1,500 each, but Lily got a gift card when she needed a specialized wheelchair that cost $500. Memories just kept coming, each one a fresh knife wound. Family dinners where Sarah casually mentioned the kids. Competitions in Europe and across the US. Trips that cost thousands of dollars. Trips my parents had funded. Christmas mornings where Sarah's kids opened piles of expensive gifts while Lily got a few small things. And I'd been grateful even for that. Every family gathering where my financial struggles were treated like a shameful secret. While Sarah's affluence was celebrated, I thought about the times I called my mother crying about how we couldn't afford Lily's heart medication that insurance wouldn't cover. How my mother had suggested I look into patient assistance programs, maybe talk to a social worker, perhaps try generic alternatives. All reasonable suggestions, except she was making them while she had the means to simply write a check that would have solved the problem instantly. There was this one moment I couldn't stop thinking about. Lily was confined to a standard hospital bed, and she was devastated. She was only 6, and she was so uncomfortable about it. There was this beautiful, specialized bed we'd found online made with pressure-sensitive foam that looked exactly like a regular twin bed. It cost $400, we couldn't afford it. Lily slept in an uncomfortable generic bed that made her skin itch and made her cry because it didn't look right. Kids at school during the brief period she could attend would stare at her. I had mentioned it to my mother once in passing, during a phone call. I wasn't even asking for money, just venting about how hard it was to see Lily so unhappy with her comfort on top of everything else she was dealing with. My mother had made sympathetic noises and said nothing else about it. The specialized bed never materialized, but Sarah's daughter, Mia, got a $700 designer saddle collection. That same month, a gift from her grandparents for winning a junior competition. During those 2 weeks of discovery, I also reached out to Ethan's parents, Martha and Robert. They'd been the ones who took out a second mortgage on their modest home to help us pay for Lily's treatment. They'd never been wealthy, both retired bank tellers living on pensions, but they'd done whatever they could. I met Martha for lunch and told her what I discovered. She sat there, in silence for a long time after I finished talking, her face going through a range of emotions I couldn't quite read. Finally, she said, "Julianne, I want you to know something. When we took out that mortgage, we called your parents. We thought if we all pulled our resources together, we could cover everything Lily needed without putting such a massive burden on any one family." My heart stopped. "You called them?" "Robert did," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "He called your father, explained what we were doing, and asked if they could contribute anything at all. Even a few thousand would have helped. Do you know what your father said?" I couldn't speak, could only shake my head. He said they wished they could help, but they'd already overextended themselves, helping Sarah with some home renovations, and couldn't take on any more financial obligations. Martha reached across the table and gripped my hand. "Julianne, we didn't tell you because you were already carrying so much. We didn't want to add to your burden. But yes, your parents refused to help, even when we were literally mortgaging our home renovations. They told Ethan's parents they couldn't help because of home renovations." I later drove past Sarah's house and saw the addition they'd put on that year. A custom-built, state-of-the-art home theater. My parents hadn't just paid for it. My father had bragged about it at a family gathering, about how he was so happy he could help his daughter expand her home for her growing family. The rage I felt in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was pure, white, hot, and all-consuming. I had to pull over on the drive home because my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't steer. I called my therapist's emergency line and spent an hour talking her down from what she gently described as a completely understandable crisis response. I also started digging into the crowdfunding campaign we'd set up for Lily. I hadn't looked at it in years because it was too painful. But I forced myself to go through every donation, every comment, every share. The thing that struck me was how many people had given what they could. Ethan's coworkers, people from Lily's school, neighbors, even strangers who'd heard about her story. There were donations of $10 from people who clearly didn't have $10 to spare. $30 here, $60 there, each one accompanied by prayers and well wishes. My parents had donated $500 to the fund. $500 with a public comment about how they were praying for their granddaughter and wished they could do more. $500 while raiding Salises. They were writing checks for $40,000 per child per year. The hypocrisy was staggering, but Sarah hadn't donated anything. Not 1 cent. I had excused it at the time, telling myself she was busy with her kids, that she was probably helping in other ways I didn't see. But now I knew the truth. She'd been too busy enjoying the money that should have saved my daughter's life to contribute even a token amount to her niece's medical fund. I spent hours reading through the messages of support from strangers on that campaign page, crying over the kindness of people who never even met Lily. An elderly woman on a fixed income had donated $75 with a note that said, "I remember when my grandson was sick. No child should suffer. Praying for your sweet girl." A teenager had donated their part-time job money, $50, because they had read Lily's story and wanted to help these strangers. These people, with no obligation to us whatsoever, had scraped together what they could, while my parents sat on hundreds of thousands of dollars and said no. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Quick note, before we dive deeper. Share in the comments how your day is going and where you're watching from. Let's see who's out there today. Then yesterday I got a text in the family group chat from my mom. Sunday dinner at our house. Sarah and the kids will be there. We haven't all been together in so long. Please come, Julianne. It would mean so much to your father and me. I stared at that text for a long time. Then I replied, "I'll be there." Ethan thought I was crazy. When I told him what I was planning, we met for coffee because I needed someone to talk to. Someone who understood the depth of this betrayal because he'd lived it too. When I explained what I discovered and what I intended to do, he was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, his eyes full of that familiar grief we shared. "Once you say these things, you cannot take them back." "Good," I said. "I don't want to take them back." He nodded, slowly, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Lily would be proud of you for standing up for yourself. For standing up for her?" That made me cry right there in the coffee shop because he was right. Lily was always so brave, so willing to fight. She never backed down, never gave up. Even when her tiny body was failing her, I owed it to her memory to be just as brave. So today, I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs, the same house I grew up in with a big willow tree in the front yard and the garden my mother obsesses over. Sarah's Porsche was already in the driveway along with my parents' sedan. I sat in my beat-up Honda for a few minutes, gathering my courage, my heart pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. I walked in without knocking. Sunday dinners were always casual, family just letting themselves in. I could hear laughter coming from the dining room, could smell my mother's herb-roasted chicken, could hear my nieces and nephew chattering excitedly about something. For a moment, just a brief, painful moment, I remembered when Lily would have been part of that noise, her high-pitched giggle mixing with her cousins' voices. When I walked into the Jaldadake dining room, everyone looked up. My mother smiled. That practice-perfect hostess smile. "Julianne, We're so glad you could make it. We're just about to sit down. Sarah was helping set the table, looking effortlessly put together in designer slacks and a silk blouse. Hey Jay, long time. No see. My father was already seated at the head of the table, and he nodded at me. Hello, sweetheart. The kids were in the living room glued to their laptops, not even noticing my arrival. I looked at them, these healthy, privileged children, and thought about Lily, about how she'd loved to read, how she'd wanted to be an artist, how she'd never complained, even when the painful procedures made her so sick she couldn't move. Let's eat, my mother said, carrying the chicken to the table. Everyone sit down. I took my usual seat, the one I'd sat in for family dinners since childhood. I found out my parents had secretly been paying for my sister's kids' elite equestrian club while refusing to help with my daughter's heart surgery. She didn't make it. Today, I finally confronted them at dinner, and the table exploded. Sarah sat across from me, my parents on either end of the table. The kids eventually wandered in, took their seats, and dinner began. It was so normal, so perfectly ordinary, that for a moment I questioned whether I was really going to do this. My mother served the food, asking everyone about their weeks. Sarah talked about Mia's riding competition and Jack's club fundraising. My dad mentioned something about his golf league. They asked me how work was going, and I gave vague one-word answers. The food tasted like ash in my mouth. Julianne, you seem quiet, my mother observed in that way she had of making an observation sound like a criticism. Is everything all right? This was it, and the moment I'd been planning for. I set down my fork and looked directly at her. Actually, Mom, I have something I need to talk to you all about. The table got quiet. Sarah looked at me with mild curiosity. My dad paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. The kids continued eating, oblivious. I had coffee with Jessica Hayes a couple of weeks ago. I began, my voice surprisingly steady. You remember Jessica, my roommate from college? My mother nodded slowly, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear maybe, or recognition. She works at the academy now. In billing administration, I turned to Sarah. That's where your kids go to ride, right? Really? Prestigious place. Must cost a fortune. Sarah glanced at our parents, then back at me. Yes, it's a wonderful club. We're very fortunate. You are? I agreed. It's about $40,000 a year per child for membership, isn't it? So, for 3 kids, that's over $120,000 annually. Julianne, what's this about? My father asked, his voice taking on a warning tone. I ignored him, my eyes still on Sarah. Jessica mentioned something interesting. She said, Mom and Dad have been paying the membership, all of it, for all 3 kids for the past 4 years. The silence that fell over the table was deafening. Sarah's face went pale, then red. My mother's. My mouth opened and closed like a fish. My father set down his fork with a clatter. Mom started, but I held up my hand. Do you remember 7 years ago when Lily was sick? When she needed surgery, that insurance wouldn't cover. When I called you, literally on my knees in a hospital corridor, begging for help. My voice was shaking now, but I pushed forward. Do you remember what you told me? My mother's eyes filled with tears. Julianne, please. You said you were on a fixed income. You said you didn't have that kind of money. You suggested I look into bankruptcy. I laughed and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. I needed $60,000 to save my daughter's life. And you told me you couldn't afford it. But you could afford one. $120,000 a year for Sarah's kids to take riding lessons. It's not that simple, my father said, his face reddening. The situations were different. Different how? I demanded. Please explain to me how paying for a luxury sports club is more important than saving your granddaughter's life. I'm dying to understand this reasoning. Sarah found her voice. Julianne, I didn't know about this. I swear. I thought Mom and Dad were just helping a little bit. Don't lie. I snapped. You knew exactly where that money was coming from. You knew they were paying the full fees. And you said nothing. Even at Lily's funeral, you said nothing. That's not fair. Sarah protested. I didn't know the details of what happened with Lily's treatment because you never asked. I was standing now, my chair scraping back. You never once asked how we were managing, how we were paying for anything. You were too busy enjoying your perfect life with your healthy kids and your Porsche and your Caribbean vacations. Julianne, sit down, my father ordered. You're upsetting the children. I looked at my nieces and nephew, who were staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. Part of me felt bad for scaring them, but the larger part of me, the part that had died with Lily, didn't care. I'm upsetting the children, I repeated incredulously. I watched my child die because you chose a recreational membership over her life. I held her, while she took her last breath, knowing we'd done everything we could, never knowing that you had the money to help us all along. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it did to Ethan? Our marriage ended because of the grief and the financial ruin. I lost everything, including myself. My mother was crying now, tears running down her face. We thought it was too risky, she sobbed. The doctor said there were no guarantees. The surgery might not work, at least with the club. We knew the money would be used well. Used well. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You gambled on my daughter's life because there were no guarantees. Every medical treatment is a risk, Mom. But she was 6 years old and fighting for her life. She deserved a chance. You need to calm down, my father said, standing up now too. We made the decision we thought was best. Sarah's children needed this club more than Lily needed to live. Say it. I want to hear you say it. I was crying now too. Years of grief and rage pouring out of me. Tell me that your other grandchildren's hobbies was more important than Lily's life. That's not what we're saying, Sarah interjected. Julianne, you're twisting everything. Am I? I turned on her. Then please untwist it for me. Explain how this makes sense. Explain how you can live with yourselves. Any of you. My mother was shaking her head, reaching out toward me. Julianne, please. We love you. We loved Lily. We thought we were making the right choice. You thought about yourselves, I said flatly. You thought about appearances, about Sarah's perfect family, about being the grandparents who could afford to send their grandkids to the most exclusive places. You didn't think about Lily struggling to breathe, her little body full of tubes trying to keep her heart beating. You didn't think about me, your daughter, falling apart piece by piece. We couldn't afford both, my father said. And there it was, the truth finally spoken aloud. We had already committed to helping Sarah with the club. We couldn't afford both. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah looked stricken. My mother collapsed back into her chair, and I felt something inside me finally completely break apart. You chose, I said quietly. You had to choose. And you chose Sarah's children over mine. You chose luxury over life itself. Lily was going to die anyway, my father said, and I swear time stopped. The doctors gave her a 30% chance. Even with the surgery, it would have been throwing money away. The sound that came out of me wasn't quite human, Sarah gasped. My mother let out a small shriek, and my father, realizing what he'd said, tried to backtrack. I didn't mean Julianne. That came out wrong. Get away from me, I said, backing toward the door. All of you stay away from me. Julianne, please, my mother begged, trying to come toward me. Let us explain. You just did, I said. You explained everything perfectly. Lily's life was a bad investment, Sarah's kids' hobbies. That was worth more. 30% odds weren't good enough for you to take a chance on your own granddaughter. I looked at each of them, memorizing their faces, knowing this was the last time I'd see them as family. You know what the worst part is? Lily loved you, even in the hospital, even when she was in pain. She'd ask about you. She'd want a video chat with Grandma and Grandpa. She made you drawings that you probably threw away. She never knew that her own grandparents valued her less than equestrian membership fees. That's not true. My mother wept. We loved her. Love is a verb, I said. It's not just a feeling, it's actions. And your actions showed me exactly where Lily ranked in your priorities. Dead last. I turned to Sarah, who was crying quietly. Her perfect composure finally cracked. I hope your kids enjoy their fancy club. I hope they appreciate the sacrifice that paid for it, even if they never know what it cost. Jack, the oldest at 12, had been watching everything with growing horror. Aunt Julianne, we didn't know. I know, buddy, I said, my voice softening just a fraction for him. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. But maybe ask your mother and your grandparents why your cousin Lily isn't here anymore. Ask them about choices and priorities. I walked out of that house and I haven't looked back. My phone has been ringing nonstop, but I blocked all their numbers. Sarah tried to come to my apartment, but I threatened to call the police. I don't care about their explanations or their justifications. There's nothing they can say that will make this right. The day after the confrontation, I woke up feeling strangely empty. Not better, not worse, just hollow. I called in sick to both my jobs because I physically couldn't move from my bed. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from that dinner over and over in my mind. Lily was going to die anyway. My father's words kept echoing in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Around noon, there was pounding on my door. I ignored it at first, but it didn't stop finally. I dragged myself up and looked through the peephole. It was Sarah, and she looked terrible. Her perfect hair was a mess. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she was still in what looked like pajamas. "Julianne, please," she called through the door. "Please just let me explain. Let me talk to you." "Go away, Sarah," I said, not even opening the door. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear to God I didn't know the full extent of it. I thought they were just helping. A little, not paying for everything. And I didn't know they'd refuse to help with Lily. I swear I didn't know." "You're a liar," I said flatly. "You had to know. You had to know you weren't paying those club fees yourself. You had to know where the money was coming from. Mark and I were paying some of it," she insisted. "I thought Mom and Dad were just supplementing. Maybe a third or something. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. Julianne, please believe me." But I couldn't believe her. I wouldn't. Because even if she hadn't known the exact amounts, she'd known our parents were giving her substantial financial help while I was drowning. She'd known Lily was sick, known we were struggling, and she'd never once questioned the disparity. She'd been content to take and take and take while her niece died. "Even if I believe you," I said through the door, "it doesn't change anything. You saw me suffering. You saw what losing Lily did to me. You came to her funeral in your designer clothes and left early for a riding competition. You never once asked if we needed help. You never offered. You just kept taking from them while I had nothing. I'm sorry," she wept. "Julianne, I'm so sorry. I didn't think that's the problem, Sarah. You didn't think about anyone but yourself and your perfect family." I pressed my hand against the door, feeling the physical barrier between us. "Leave if you don't leave right now. I'm calling the police." I heard her crying on the other side of the door for another minute before she finally left. I sank down to the floor, my back against the door, and sat there until it got dark. The texts started coming from my mother's number even, though I'd blocked her. She was using different phones trying to get through to me. Each message was a variation of the same thing. "Please talk to us. We can explain. We love you. This is all a misunderstanding." I read them all with a sense of detached numbness, then deleted them without responding. My father tried a different approach. He called my work both places, trying to get me to talk to him. My manager at the warehouse store, a kind woman named Maria, took the message and then pulled me aside. "Your father called," she said gently. "He seems pretty desperate to talk to you. Is everything okay?" "Family stuff," I said, not wanting to get into it. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't put any calls from him through to me anymore." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'll make a note, but Julianne, if you need time off, if you need anything, you let me know, okay?" I almost broke down right there in the middle of the Tenclo store, but I held it together barely. 3 days after the confrontation, I got an email from Sarah, a long rambling email that started with more apologies and excuses, but then took a turn I didn't expect. She wrote about how she confronted our parents herself, how there had been another huge fight, how our father had admitted they'd made a choice and stuck with it, because they couldn't back out of their commitment to the grandchildren's activities. She wrote that our mother had defended their decision by saying they thought the money would be wasted on Lily because her prognosis was so poor, and that at least with the club they could see tangible results. Sarah said she'd been horrified by this admission, that she told them they were wrong. that they'd made a monstrous decision. But then at the end of the email, Sarah wrote something that made my blood boil. I'd asked them to stop paying the membership. I told them we'd figure out how to afford it ourselves, or we'd transfer the kids to a public park program. But, Julianne, they're our parents. They made a mistake, a terrible one, but they're still our family. Maybe in time you can find it in your heart to forgive them for your own peace. If nothing else, I read that email 3 times. Each time getting angrier, she wanted me to forgive them. She thought stopping the payments now, 7 years too late, would somehow make things right. She still didn't get it. None of them did. I wrote back. It was the only communication I'd sent to any of them since the dinner. I kept it short. Sarah, you say they made a mistake? Mistakes are accidents. Mistakes are errors in judgment made in the heat of the moment. What they did was make a calculated, deliberate choice. They chose your children's expensive hobbies over my child's life. They chose to lie to my face while my daughter died. That's not a mistake. That's a betrayal. So fundamental, so cruel, that there's no coming back from it. Don't contact me again. I sent it and blocked her email address. 2. Ethan called me after I texted him that it was done. He didn't say much, just asked if I was okay and if I needed anything. Then he said, Lily's medical fund, the crowdfunding campaign. How much did it raise? About $15,000, I said. Why? And how much did you say your parents have spent on Sarah's kids club? $480,000 over 4 years. There was a long pause. Julianne, I think we should talk to a lawyer. I hadn't thought about legal action, but Ethan was right. There might be a case here, especially given that my parents explicitly refused to help while having the means to do so, causing Ethan and me severe financial hardship. I'm meeting with an attorney tomorrow to explore options, not because I think money will fix anything, but because they need to face consequences for their choice. People keep asking me if I feel better after the way confrontation. If I got closure, the truth is I don't feel better. I feel hollow. I feel like I'm mourning my family all over again, just like I mourned Lily. But I also feel like I finally told the truth. Like I finally stood up for my daughter even though it's too late for her. Tonight I went to Lily's grave. I haven't been in a while because it hurts too much, but I needed to tell her what I'd done. I sat there in the dark, next to her small headstone with a rose engraving she would have loved, and I talked to her. I told her about the confrontation, about the truth, about how I'd finally made them acknowledge what they'd done. I'd like to think she heard me. I'd like to think she knows that her mother fought for her, even if it came too late to matter. I placed fresh flowers on her grave, the pink carnations she loved, and I promised her that I'd keep fighting, not just for justice, but to make sure her memory means something. If you're reading this and you have children or grandchildren or anyone you claim to love, please remember this. Love isn't just words. It's choices. It's sacrifice. It's standing up for the people who need you, even when it's hard, even when it's expensive, even when the odds aren't in your favor. My parents had a choice, and they chose wrong. They chose comfort over crisis, appearances over action, safety over sacrifice. And now they have to live with that choice, just like I have to live with the loss of my daughter and the knowledge that she might have had a better chance if the people who were supposed to love her had actually shown up when she needed them the most. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll ever speak to my parents or Sarah again. I don't know if legal action will lead anywhere. All I know is that I told the truth. I faced them and I didn't back down. For Lily, I didn't back down. That's all I have left to give her now. The truth and the knowledge that someone fought for her, even if it came too late to matter. Rest in peace, my sweet girl. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up. When family chooses appearances over saving a life, like Julianne's parents did while Lily fought her illness, do you confront the truth or stay silent? Share in the comments. Drop a like if this story broke your heart. Hit subscribe and smash the hype button to tell YouTube this needs to go viral. Keep the surprises coming.